Jalapeño Chicken Cheese Soup. You might think with our last video popping off that we'd be making Jalapeño Popper Soup, but we're not. This is chicken soup first, loaded with cheese, jalapenos, and bacon to bring up the end. When you're sourcing the chicken, you can use a rotisserie, you can use whatever chicken you have at hand, leftovers, but I will add one caveat to it. Use your own personal home broth. That is not a must-have, but I can tell you it makes a difference in the end result. You can use store-bought stock or broth, but it does not have the same flavor as the bone broth that you make yourself. You can use canned chicken, but it does not have the same flavor as the leftovers from your rotisserie chicken. Definitely much prefer the white onions in going into soup. It's a bit more mild, doesn't overpower the soup that you're putting in. And for the slice, I do like to have these slices be a touch on the small side, maybe a ½ inch, ¼ inch in size. And we've got a trick coming up where we'll show you with that star of the show, the jalapenos, when to put those in matters. And we'll talk more about that later in the video. Mushrooms are one of those optional ingredients that you can put in. They add a earthy as well as hearty flavor texture into your soup. Another optional is tomatoes. We have these awesome tomatoes coming out of the garden, so creamy that all of these ingredients coming together with the colors is part of the deliciousness of it. These diced tomatoes in there add to that visual appeal. I don't recommend any more than 4 pieces of bacon. We do 3, otherwise your soup ends up tasting like bacon soup. Really all you're adding is some of that smoky flavor and some of the texture that comes along with the bacon. Too much bacon and it will. That's what it'll taste like, is bacon soup. If you haven't gotten one of these silicone garlic peelers, they make a difference. They're worth having. Makes quick work of what is otherwise a pretty tedious task, peeling that garlic. No time flat. There it is. We've got most of the prep work done. We can move on to go ahead and start cooking and assembling. At this point, this is when it starts to happen quick. We'll go ahead and get our Dutch oven, enameled cast iron going here. We've got all our ingredients together. And the first thing we want to start out with is a bit of olive oil, probably about 2 teaspoons, and about 2 teaspoons of butter. The butter adds a fat content to this. That will add that mouthfeel, that bit of flavor. Let that get warmed up, and then we'll add our onions and garlic. Stick with me here. This happens fast at this point. In go the onions and garlic. And this is probably only for about 2 or 3 minutes. You'll see them become translucent. You do not want to burn either the onions or the garlic. At this point, I've got to throw in some cracked peppercorns, some fresh ground peppercorns. It'll fill your house up with that delicious home cooking aroma that will make the house start to wonder what Dad's cooking. Kids will actually come out of their room and ask. Yeah, that's right. They'll come out of their room. Here's one of the key differences in this soup, and this is that homemade broth. It's got that gelatin look to it. You cannot get that, at least not that I'm aware of, easily in the store. And this is frozen. There's still a big chunk of ice left in that. Throw that in and it'll all melt in its own due time. Homemade chicken broth. So we've reached a slow rolling simmer over here. Next we're going to start adding the cheese. And this is when you need to be careful because the cheese can go to the bottom and stick. You need to be mindful about the stirring during this, otherwise you'll get that burned layer of cheese on the bottom. I will also recommend that you use grated cheese from a block of, you pick which type of cheddar you want to use. Throw that strong, powerful cheddar flavor into this. I actually don't know. We're gonna measure it. I've always done this by eye, how much cheese to use. At the end of this, we're gonna measure this out to give you an idea of how much this is. Make that as low and slow as we can. We've cut this cream cheese up into chunks and bits, but all of that goes in. And be mindful, that cream cheese is going to have to melt and dissolve all throughout. Really, all the cheese has to. But you'll see these white chunks of cream cheese in there for a period of time until they dissolve. Shredded mild cheddar. That's 4 cups. And that's 6 cups. That's about where I want to be. And then I'm going to assess. Nope, I need more than that. So now all those cheeses are melting and melding together. We're getting a little bit thicker. We're gonna go with some more cheese. All told, we're at about 8 cups. We're starting to get a little sticking on the bottom, so I did have to turn the heat down some. The next star of the show, the ensemble of stars amongst this show, is our picked rotisserie chicken. Into that, we're going to go with a cup of sour cream, maybe a cup and a half. And I'll give you a hint. You'll notice we haven't put any salt in. So here's another trick to use. We haven't put any salt in. It needs to have salt content. Why not increase the flavor profile? We've already got chicken broth in there, powerful flavor. We've got chicken bouillon, which is extremely high salt content, and adding more of that chicken flavor. So probably 2.5 tablespoons of chicken broth, and then we'll give it a taste. Salting to taste. Now we're down to the bacon and the tomatoes. So let's check our salt content, because pretty much all the ingredients are in, except for that final star of the show. So let's give a taste for salt content. Spot on. We're gonna throw the lid on this and let this simmer, keeping an eye on the cheese sticking to the bottom, stirring occasionally. Very low heat, and all of those flavors will marry. Here's a quick hot pepper tip for you. Throw a little bit, oh, that's more than a little bit. Throw a little bit away and rub that onto your hands. You won't need the gloves. That's a barrier that protects your hands. That was a bit heavy, but just a little bit of oil protects your hands, and you don't have to worry about that jalapeno heat oil later. It'll wash off with that olive oil. So we've been talking this whole time about jalapeno cheddar cheese soup, and we haven't talked about the next star of the show, and that's jalapenos, and why we wait until it's the last thing that we put into this soup for the final 30 minutes or so of simmer. And that's because we love this color. Just look at that beauty. And if you put this in the beginning, in the saute, or right there in there with the broth, these turn into gray, mushy lumps. That's not what you want in your jalapeno cheddar cheese soup. Right here towards the tail end, the last ingredient that goes in, the jalapeno. You get to control the heat at this point. I put 6 or 7 jalapenos chopped up in at this point. Let's suppose you only threw in 1 or 2 jalapenos. Jalapeno is a strong flavor going into anything. You put 1 or 2 jalapenos in there, the flavor will disperse throughout, and you won't get that high heat. Set aside some of those diced, sliced jalapenos, some cheese, and a little bit of sour cream. That is for your guests or your family members to decide how hot they want it to be. Woo! Feel the heat, feel the kick, kind of thing. All of those comments that come in. Putting that, my mouth is starting to water because I'm standing over top of all of this deliciousness. Did you know that red jalapenos are just ripe? And why you can't buy them in the store is because they're a little bit more tender, a little bit more soft, a little sweeter. They're phenomenal. If you're growing your own and getting them out of the garden, they can't ship those because they wouldn't survive the shipping process. You can still see all those vibrant colors in there. Hearty. We'll go ahead and get our bowl set up. Then we'll do that garnish. So delicious. If you like this recipe in this video, you should check this one out.